Why are you even here? James sneered at his ex-wife during his engagement party. You lost me, remember? But minutes later, the entire room fell silent when she handed him one envelope, and suddenly the man who mocked her looked like he'd seen his whole future collapse. The grand hall of the Riviera Hotel sparkled under crystal chandeliers, each prism refracting the warm golden light across the polished marble floors. Waiters moved seamlessly among clusters of guests, carrying trays of champagne flutes that reflected the shimmer of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. The air buzzed with laughter, the soft hum of a string quartet, and the subtle undercurrent of whispered speculation. Serena stood near the center of it all, radiant in a red silk dress that hugged her curves with the elegance of a second skin. The color wasn't accidental, it was a statement. Red was power. Red was a passion. Red was victorious. And tonight, she won. She lifted her glass, her perfectly manicured fingers glinting in the soft glow, and scanned the crowd with a confident smile. Each eye that met hers affirmed her triumph. Compliments and murmurs of admiration followed her like a current she could ride, lifting her higher. You look stunning, Serena, whispered one of the groom's colleagues, a young woman with a hint of envy in her tone. Absolutely breathtaking. I think he's lucky. Serena turned her gaze toward the man of the hour, the groom, James. His tailored navy suit emphasized the broadness of his shoulders, the wealth of his frame, the charm that had once made him untouchable. But tonight, all eyes were on her. James, usually so commanding, now lingered near the stage, holding his champagne with an awkwardness she had never seen before. Raising her glass, Serena's voice cut through the chatter, applause, smooth but she felt the warmth of her victory. She had claimed this moment, this life, this man. And yet, as she let her gaze sweep over the crowd, a faint whisper of unease crept into her chest. A small ripple in the perfect reflection of triumph she had cultivated. The guests murmured, their voices blending into a soft hum. Some spoke openly, praising Serena for her elegance, while others exchanged subtle glances that hinted at something unsaid. She caught snippets of conversation as she glided past them, their words like blades she could only half catch. Red suits her, bold, but a little too bold, don't you think? She seems confident. Dangerous even. Do you think she knows about the clause? At the mention of the clause, Serena's pulse quickened. Clause? What clause? She frowned, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Perhaps it was just idle gossip, the harmless whisper of guests intrigued by wealth and scandal. She had ignored these murmurs for months, and she wasn't about to let them steal her moment now. Still, as she mingled, a small, persistent thought nagged at the back of her mind. Why did so many of the guests seem almost expectant? Expectant for what, she didn't know. She focused on the laughter, the champagne, the way the light caught the silk of her dress, and let the unease dissolve for now. James, meanwhile, floated from one guest to another, charming, but every so often his eyes darted toward the entrance. Serena noticed it and followed his gaze, a little thrill of amusement running through her. He was nervous, and she knew it. But why? What could make him hesitate when everything seemed perfectly under control? The murmurs quieted suddenly, as if the room had collectively inhaled. Serena's gaze snapped to the entrance, and there she was. Not glamorous, not loud. Just calm. Poised. Dressed in a simple white dress that fell to her knees with understated elegance, the ex-wife moved with an effortless grace that contrasted sharply with Serena's flamboyant victory. The crowd parted subtly for her, a silent acknowledgement of her presence. For a moment, Serena froze, her chest tightening. This was supposed to be her night. Every detail had been calculated, the dress, the lighting, the champagne, the guests' reactions. And yet here was the ex-wife, quiet, almost invisible in her subtle power. Serena's first instinct was to smirk, to approach her with a superiority she knew was absolute. But there was something different in the air, a tension she could feel ripple through the room. She realized that this wasn't a confrontation she could stage. This was something deeper, something she had underestimated. James' lips pressed into a thin line. His confidence had faltered entirely. He had expected drama, perhaps an angry outburst, a scene. But what he faced was stillness. A calm that carried an edge sharper than any raised voice could. Serena straightened her posture and walked toward the stage, every step calculated, graceful. Her heels clicked against the marble in a rhythm that echoed her heartbeat, fast, proud, unyielding. The crowd turned with her, anticipating her performance, waiting for the storm that never came. James followed, his steps less assured, the champagne trembling slightly in his hand. Serena's eyes locked on him, daring him to meet her gaze. He faltered, and in that moment, she savored a private victory. She thought she had prepared for everything, every insult, every glance, every whispered condemnation, yet nothing had prepared her for this quiet, potent presence. Serena stepped onto the stage, her hand extended toward the crowd in a wave of practiced charm. "Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. It means so much to us." Her voice rang clear and confident, but a flicker of doubt crossed her mind. She noticed James stiffen, noticed the crowd's eyes shift from her to the entrance. The ex-wife didn't move, didn't speak, just watched, her expression unreadable. And Serena realized something horrifying. This woman wasn't here for confrontation. She was here for control. Then it happened. Without a word, the ex-wife glided up the aisle, her white dress whispering against the marble floor. Serena's heart skipped a beat, anticipation and dread intertwining. She expected shouting, tears, perhaps even humiliation. But the ex-wife's hands were steady as she carried a simple, sealed envelope. Serena's eyes narrowed, scanning the crowd for reactions. Guests murmured, cameras flashed, whispers grew into a low hum of tension. The ex-wife reached James. She handed him the envelope directly, with a small, almost imperceptible smile. "For you," she said, her voice soft, but commanding enough to slice through the noise. James' hand hovered for a moment before taking it, his fingers brushing hers. A small, electric tension sparked in the contact, subtle but undeniable. He turned the envelope over in his hand, eyes darting to Serena, and then back to the ex-wife. I don't understand." The ex-wife tilted her head slightly serene. "You will, soon enough. Perhaps now is the perfect time to review the past before embracing the future." Serena's pulse raced. The moment had shifted, and the confidence she had held so carefully began to crack. She had anticipated scandal, confrontation, perhaps even drama, but nothing prepared her for the weight of what she now sensed. This wasn't a public scene meant to humiliate, it was something far more dangerous. The crowd leaned in, sensing a shift in the air. The string quartet faltered in the background, the soft notes replaced by a tense silence. Every eye was on James, on the envelope, on the quiet woman who had just disrupted Serena's perfect night without raising her voice, without a single dramatic gesture. And Serena realized in that moment that tonight was no longer about her victory. It was about control, legacy, and a clause she hadn't even known existed, a clause that could change everything. Her hand tightened around her glass. The red silk of her dress felt suddenly heavy, a reminder of power assumed, power yet untested. And as she watched James, pale and uncertain, break the seal, a sense of foreboding settled in her chest. The real game had just begun. James' fingers trembled as he broke the seal on the envelope, the delicate paper rustling louder than any sound in the now silent room. Guests leaned forward, cameras poised, whispers fading into breathless anticipation. Serena's heart raced, each beat thudding against the silk of her chest. She had prepared for confrontation, for a scandalous scene of accusation, for the ex-wife to lash out and ruin her night. But nothing had prepared her for this quiet, deliberate unfolding of power. Inside the envelope were a series of documents, neatly stacked, each page embossed with the unmistakable seal of a corporate law firm. James' brow furrowed as he flipped through them. He swallowed hard, a flush creeping across his cheeks that neither the golden lighting nor the confident air of the room could conceal. Serena felt a shiver of unease, the first real crack in the armor of her triumph. Guests craned their necks, craning their curiosity over the envelope. A hush settled over the hall, broken only by the quiet, almost imperceptible sigh of the ex-wife. She stood poised, her hands clasped in front of her, expression calm, eyes steady. No words. No dramatic accusations. Just presence. And it was more powerful than any screaming scene Serena could have imagined. Serena's mind raced, trying to anticipate what the documents contained. Perhaps a hidden debt? A scandalous secret? Anything to tarnish her perfect night. But as James' eyes darted nervously from the papers to the ex-wife and back to Serena, she realized this was not a personal attack. This was a declaration of authority. The groom's voice was barely audible at first, tight and strained. These clauses. I thought we had resolved them. The ex-wife's lips curved in a subtle, controlled smile. Some things can't be resolved, James. They can only be acknowledged. And now, I think it's the perfect time. Serena's pulse quickened. What could this possibly mean? Her mind raced through every rumor, every whispered conversation she had overheard earlier. The claws. The whispers. Now it all seemed to converge, a dark storm forming around her carefully constructed victory. The documents revealed what Serena could barely comprehend at the moment. Every line, every paragraph, seemed to strip the foundation from beneath her. It was a clause embedded in their prenuptial agreement, an obscure, almost forgotten clause triggered by remarriage within 5 years of the divorce. It was straightforward in language, yet its implications were devastatingly complex. 70% of their joint assets, the house, the company, all investments, automatically reverted to the ex-wife should James remarry too soon. The room seemed to constrict around Serena. The air became thick, charged with tension, and even the soft clinking of champagne glasses in the distance felt intrusive. Her victory, so long anticipated and so eagerly celebrated, evaporated before her eyes. James' voice trembled as he spoke again, though still quiet enough that only Serena could hear. I didn't think she'd enforce it now. I thought it was dormant, just legal formalities. The ex-wife's gaze remained unwavering. Dormant, James, until the moment it becomes relevant. You have chosen to disregard the safeguards of the past, but the past never forgets. Serena's stomach twisted. She had imagined herself the conqueror, the woman who claimed the man and the wealth as her own. But now she realized she had walked into a carefully designed trap, one laid by a woman who had understood power long before Serena had even learned the meaning of strategy. She tried to mask her panic, to maintain the red silk armor she had worn so confidently just moments ago. Yet the tightness in her chest betrayed her. The realization hit her. This man, this groom she had celebrated as her prize, was still bound to his past in ways she had never anticipated. The crowd, sensing the shift, began murmuring again. Whispers filled the room, some sympathetic, some judgmental, and some quietly reveling in the unraveling of a narrative they had assumed would end in Serena's triumph. The moment of public reckoning rippled outward. Cameras caught every twitch of James' face, every hesitation in Serena's posture, every controlled blink of the ex-wife. It was almost cinematic, a tableau of quiet domination, humiliation, and revelation. Guests leaned in closer, their curiosity morphing into collective suspense. A few whispered guesses, others speculated openly. The clause, the inheritance, the power shift. Serena could hear fragments. She doesn't even know what she's in for. He thought he could start over. Silly man. The ex-wife finally spoke, her voice firm, commanding, slicing through the buzzing murmurs. Everyone here admires ambition, yes. But ambition without understanding is dangerous. You may admire appearances, Serena, but wealth is more than what meets the eye. A murmur of astonishment swept through the room. Serena's carefully maintained smile faltered. She had counted on admiration, on envy, on desire directed toward her. She had counted on James' presence and authority. But the ex-wife had seized the attention effortlessly, commanding it with nothing but quiet power and impeccable timing. Serena's mind reeled. The documents, the clause, the murmurs, she realized the guests weren't here to watch her triumph. They were here to witness the unmasking of her assumption that victory was simply a matter of charm, beauty, and audacity. James' voice broke the silence, his tone pleading, faltering. I didn't expect it to happen tonight. I thought we could. The ex-wife held up a hand, silencing him. It happens now because now is the consequence of choices. The past always matters. Decisions are never erased by new beginnings. Serena's stomach churned, the red silk of her dress suddenly feeling like a costume that concealed nothing of real power. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her next move, and she felt exposed, vulnerable, and unprepared for the reality of control that was no longer in her hands. Inside, Serena was a storm. Each thought collided violently with the next: the engagement, the celebrations, the admiration, all illusions compared to the stark reality now in front of her. She had believed in the simplicity of conquest: win the man, win the wealth, win the applause. But the ex-wife had reminded her of an immutable truth: power is not claimed through beauty or boldness alone. She replayed every moment of the past months in her mind, every word, every smile, every sign she had interpreted as victory. The strategic patience of the ex-wife now became blindingly clear. Everything Serena had celebrated as her triumph had been constructed in a space still bound to the ex-wife's authority. She felt a mixture of fury, humiliation, and reluctant admiration. Fury at the betrayal of her expectations. Humiliation at her public vulnerability. Admiration, almost grudgingly, at the meticulous control wielded by a woman who had seemed so quiet and unassuming. Her gaze flicked to James, and the disappointment in his eyes mirrored her own dawning realization. He was not a victim in the conventional sense. He had known, in some measure, the power he still belonged to. Yet he had underestimated it, and now that miscalculation threatened to unravel everything Serena had assumed to be hers. A guest leaned closer, whispering as if sharing a secret. She doesn't just win with charm, she wins with understanding. Serena's jaw tightened. Understanding, yes, but mastery. That was the distinction. And the ex-wife had it. Finally, James stepped forward, his composure fractured, but his words deliberate. Serena, I should have told you. About the clause, about the documents. I thought it wouldn't matter. I thought. His voice faltered, and he closed his eyes briefly, as if the weight of truth itself was crushing him. Serena's eyes locked onto his, demanding honesty. The applause and murmurs around them faded into an almost deafening silence. She could feel every heartbeat, every tension in his shoulders, every flicker of vulnerability. I knew, he admitted, finally, the words barely above a whisper. I knew the clause existed, but I never imagined it would be invoked now, tonight, at this moment. I thought. You thought you could start over, Serena interrupted, her voice controlled, sharp, cutting through the tension. You thought you could erase the past, but the past never forgets. James nodded, shame and fear mingling in his eyes. The ex-wife watched, serene, satisfied, yet not gloating. Serena realized she was witnessing the dismantling of her assumptions in real time. She had entered this room believing she had won, only to discover that wealth, control, and legacy were far more complex than any individual desire could dictate. Her red silk dress felt suddenly heavy, the color of victory transformed into a reminder of misjudged power. And as she stepped back from the stage, heart racing, mind whirling, she understood the stakes of the real game she had just entered, a game she hadn't even known existed until now. The air had changed. The soft glow of chandeliers seemed suddenly harsher, reflecting not celebration but scrutiny. Conversations around the hall had shifted from polite admiration to careful speculation. Some guests subtly aligned themselves with the ex-wife, drawn to her calm authority, while others lingered near Serena, unsure whether to support or pity her. Serena moved slowly, almost deliberately, letting her eyes scan the room. She noted the faces, a few whispers of encouragement, smiles that didn't quite reach the eyes, and the subtle glares of those who felt she had overstepped. Every gesture, every glance, became a potential ally or enemy. It was a social battlefield, one she hadn't fully recognized until now. Her mind raced through every possible strategy. She had always relied on charm and audacity, believing in her ability to manipulate perception. But here, perception was not enough. Authority had a language of its own, silent and absolute, and the ex-wife spoke it fluently. Serena realized she had underestimated her. James lingered near the stage, avoiding eye contact, shifting uncomfortably under the weight of the documents he had revealed. He looked to Serena for guidance, reassurance, even defense. But she couldn't offer any. She didn't yet know how to navigate this new reality. The ex-wife, meanwhile, remained calm, watching Serena's subtle movements with measured curiosity. There was no hostility in her eyes, only an unspoken message. Control was not claimed by beauty or boldness alone. It was understood, maintained, and executed. Serena felt a surge of both admiration and frustration. This woman had mastered the art of power while Serena had relied on spectacle. And the realization hit her like a cold wind. Tonight was no longer about public display or romantic conquest. It was about understanding, strategy, and survival. The shift in the room was palpable. Even the guests, some of whom had arrived expecting to witness Serena's triumph, sensed the new hierarchy. Whispers turned into quiet discussions, speculation turning to acknowledgement. The ex-wife's presence was no longer just notable, it was authoritative. She commanded attention without demanding it, her calm and deliberate movements exerting influence more potent than any raised voice. Serena's chest tightened as she watched the ex-wife subtly gesture toward a cluster of guests, guiding their attention to her without words. It was a masterclass in presence, a demonstration of how control could be exercised without confrontation. Serena realized the simple truth she had missed. Power wasn't flaunted. It was quietly enforced, recognized, and respected. James approached, his tone apologetic yet fraught with panic. Serena, we can still work through this. Maybe we can negotiate, adjust. She shook her head slowly, realizing the futility of his words. Negotiation would not erase what had been legally cemented. The ex-wife's authority was absolute within these terms. Every asset, every decision, every control point that Serena had assumed she would inherit now belonged, in large part, to a woman who had anticipated every move, every assumption, every miscalculation. Even the guests seemed to sense the shift. Some exchanged quiet nods toward the ex-wife, others avoided looking at Serena entirely. The balance of admiration had tilted, and Serena felt it like a physical weight pressing against her chest. She had been celebrated as a conqueror moments ago. Now she stood in the shadow of someone whose quiet competence made her own boldness feel almost reckless. The symbolism of the night became almost literal. Serena, radiant in her red silk, was the visible spectacle of triumph and desire. The ex-wife, serene in white, represented authority, foresight, and control. Every movement, glance, and posture of the two women contrasted so sharply that the guests seemed to sense a silent duel. Serena stepped closer to James, her voice measured but cutting. So this has always been under her control. And you never thought to mention it. Her words carried both accusation and incredulity. James shifted uncomfortably. I didn't think it would matter. I thought the clause was irrelevant now, dormant. I miscalculated. The ex-wife's expression remained calm, her presence almost a physical force in the room. Dormant, perhaps. Forgotten, never. Decisions have consequences, James. And power is never fully relinquished. Serena's gaze flicked between the two of them. Red versus white. Passion versus strategy. Desire versus authority. She realized that beauty and confidence, which she had wielded like a weapon, could not match foresight and meticulous planning. Her triumph had been premature, her victory assumed, and now she was left to confront the reality that her opponent had mastered the game she thought she controlled. The guests, sensing the tension, murmured quietly, careful to observe but not interfere. Every look Serena cast at the ex-wife carried a mix of envy, fear, and grudging respect. She understood that she had entered a new arena, one where the rules were invisible but enforced with quiet precision. The party, which had begun as a celebration of love and success, now felt like a carefully staged theater of consequence. Serena moved through the hall, her steps deliberate, but each glance, each acknowledgement of the guests' shifting attention, reminded her of the fragile nature of her assumed victory. She realized that her charm, audacity, and beauty, while impressive, had limits. They could command attention, but they could not enforce authority over legal structures, legacy, or calculated foresight. The ex-wife had demonstrated a level of control that Serena had never anticipated, and every move she made now had to be measured against this understanding. James lingered, silent, uncertain, his usual confidence shattered. Serena could feel the tension in his posture, the awareness of consequences he had tried to ignore. And yet she felt no triumph in his discomfort. The night was no longer about conquest, it was about survival, strategy, and the careful negotiation of power. Guests whispered, cameras caught every movement, and the music of the string quartet, once lively and celebratory, now felt like an accompaniment to a quiet reckoning. Serena's mind raced, plotting next steps, reconsidering assumptions, and acknowledging the uncomfortable truth. Tonight's victory was not hers to claim. The final moments of the evening were heavy with unspoken acknowledgement. Serena, standing in her red dress, understood the painful reality. Appearances could be controlled, admiration could be commanded, but power, legacy, and control belonged to those who understood the rules before entering the game. The ex-wife, in quiet white, had orchestrated the evening without drama, without confrontation, but with complete dominance. Serena's chest rose and fell as she processed the revelation. The envelope, the clause, the reactions of the guests, it was a lesson in humility and strategy. She had believed she could seize a life, a man, a fortune, simply by entering a room and claiming attention. She had been wrong. James approached, words trembling on his lips, but Serena did not meet them with accusation. She only shook her head slightly, a subtle acknowledgement of reality. Her vision cleared. She saw the landscape of influence, control, and power laid bare. And as she stepped away from the stage, her movements measured, she glanced once more at the ex-wife. The woman in white smiled faintly, not with triumph, but with the quiet knowledge of her own authority. Serena realized the truth. She may have worn red, radiated confidence, and commanded attention, but the ex-wife, calm, poised, and calculated, owned the board. The crowd had witnessed more than a confrontation. They had witnessed a transfer of control without a single shout, without a single dramatic gesture, but with precision that left no doubt. Serena raised her glass, not in celebration, but in recognition. The night had taught her a lesson she would not forget. Power was never given. It was understood, anticipated, and claimed, often quietly, almost invisibly. And the ex-wife had done all of that, leaving Serena to reconsider the meaning of victory, ambition, and desire. The room buzzed with subdued conversations, the crowd slowly dispersing, leaving the echoes of revelation and the weight of strategy lingering in the air. Serena moved through the hall, her mind already calculating next steps, but knowing one unassailable truth. Tonight, she had learned that beauty, audacity, and desire, while commanding, were not enough to claim what the ex-wife had always understood. The real game had only just begun. I hope you enjoyed this beautiful story. Please don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe to this channel for more interesting stories. Bye, see you in the next one.